All right. Well, hello, and welcome to Intercultural Spark, that show about the spark inside you that drives you to spark change in the world through mission-driven businesses and life projects. Each week, we talk to a different guest with a special curiosity to sort of what they do and how they do it, and also really how they tie their purpose and their meaning to driving a successful business. I am your host, Deanna Schaas. I'm the founder of Intercultural Talk, and that's a digital, intercultural, and real life consultancy that serves, you guessed it, people pursuing mission driven businesses and life projects. So each show, each week, I'm also a group fitness instructor. So every week I do a exercise of the week, and I'm going to show you this one first today because the exercise is interpretive. It ties into the theme of this week's show. So before I introduce our guest, let me just give you something to think about as we have our conversation. So this is a trapezius stretch, which is the side of your neck. For your trapezius, sit up tall in your chair, shoulders back and down. You bring your ear to shoulder and then look under your arm. As you do that, you're going to shoot your other arm down to the chair and you'll feel a stretch right there in your neck. So it's ear to shoulder, look, and shoot. So that, my friends, is our trapezius stretch. I'll let you think about why I use that for our show as we continue our conversation. All right. So speaking of today's show and guest, our guest today is Dr. Margo Jacquot. Margo is an award-winning founder and chief care officer at the Juniper Center, which has 70 clinicians at 5 physical locations, plus teletherapy across the states of Illinois and Indiana. Margo's sweet spot is the whole connection between brain science, like the physical manifestations of mental health, and those connections between the physical and the mental. And in particular, how the nervous system works and how we can trick it to be transformational in how we understand our mental health. So I am delighted to welcome Margo to the show today, and for everyone who's watching with us, welcome to Intercultural Spark. Hi, Margo. How are you?
Just dancing to your.
I love it. I always do too. That's
right?
good. Well, and dancing is a good way to actually loosen up and kind of help your mental health too. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Oh, it's really good for you. People don't realize. Please, folks, dance. Deanna, you've got to do my introductions always. That was lovely. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Deanna,
Actually, that would be like the Tonight Show or the shows where I introduce
right?
you and your guests. Absolutely. I am
You know
all
what?
in.
Let's do it. Deanna and I have been working together for a long time, so I appreciate it.
Well, actually, and that was not planned, but you just did an amazing segue to our topic today because I'm thinking like all the big shows in Vegas, and we are going to Vegas today, baby.
Right?
But actually, we're probably using Vegas in a different way. We are talking about VAGUS. Margaret, let's just dive right in with that. What is the vagus nerve, and how does it connect to our nervous system?
That's fabulous. Yeah. So Vegas, yeah, VAGUS, VAGUS. Not unfortunately Vegas like we'd like to think about it, but the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is actually a nerve bundle set that starts in your head and it innervates around your eyes and your mouth and goes down through your neck on either side and touches all of your organs. It'll end, and then you pick up your peripheral nervous system, which goes to your arms and your legs. But the vagus nerve has a lot to do, for our purposes, with your internal regulation, your mood regulation, your stress responses, your emergency responses. That's why we're talking about it today.
Mm-hmm. So, Margo, when sometimes when I tell people like I'm not really a therapist, I just play one on TV.
You do.
I'm
Oh,
actually quoting Margo though, so anyone knows
yeah.
that's who I'm quoting. And we had worked on an article, and this was literally, Margo, transformational for me. And so this is why I want to talk about it. Everyone knows about fight or flight. I feel like we always know, like, do you run? Do you fight? And it was within the last year when you were writing about the vagus and the nervous system, and you talked about 2 other automatic responses, freeze and appease. What are those? Actually, why do we only know about them recently?
Well, just the nerve science, the brain science has gotten so much better over the last many years, and not that many years. It's been in the very recent past. And somebody by the name of Stephen Porges, who was actually he was a biologist, I think, who was observing animals in the wild, and he noticed that this thing happens with animals when they are in a situation. Let's take a rabbit, for example. You know, you've seen a rabbit, and rabbits, we have a lot of them around here in the Midwest, or at least in the Chicago area. You know, they'll be munching on their grass and they'll hear me coming and
They'll freeze.
they'll freeze. Now, that is what we think of when we think of something freezing, but so we're going to use that as the example.
Mhm.
That animal is doing that so that I might not notice it. If I were a predator and it's like this, I might think it's a lawn ornament or something. So it's just a natural physiological reaction that critters have, humans included, to protect themselves. So all of these fight, flight, or freeze, these are all autonomic, which means automatic. We have
Okay.
zero control over them. And people will feel terrible. Like, I froze when I was driving that car and I didn't steer out of the way I should have. And they couldn't because their nervous system hijacked the prefrontal
Mhm.
cortex, the front part of their brain.
Okay, say that again, because that idea when something happens, you see something happen, people imagine like something bad's in front of you, you're gonna jump into action. And all of a sudden you're like, I didn't move.
Yes.
I'm a bad person. I didn't move. I didn't do anything. Say that again, because you just explained why that's actually not you consciously doing nothing. It's your nervous system taking over.
Right. It's your brain and your nervous system.
Oh,
So the emergency response centers of the brain rule our world, right? The prime directive of the human is survival, not happiness. Sorry, folks. I wish they were different. It's survival. So the survival centers of our brain have evolved very little over time. So what happens is our brain, we have the prefrontal cortex, is which what we're hoping is going to drive the bus, right? This is the part that's going to be in charge. I'm going to get to choose what I'm going to do. To your point, we think we're choosing. And when we're in an emergency situation or our system can detect danger, and folks, I will tell you, how many of you have ever had a mouse in your house? Not this house, thank goodness. Our last house, right? Mouse in the house. And I'm in the kitchen, and like I couldn't believe it. I did all the things I thought were so stupid. I screamed, I jumped up
yeah,
on the chair. And when I first
totally.
I was like, what exactly is that mouse going to do to me? Like, it's gross. I might go, oh, yuck. It was an automatic response.
Sure.
That's not one that we're thinking about. So
Mm.
those survival centers of the brain really rule the roost. They are going to make the choices for us. So what happens with this freeze response, right? So we might fly out of a room, we might run away, we might have some other response like that. We might fight, we might turn around and say something to somebody, we might actually swing at somebody if we feel or put our arm up or do something that we didn't plan to do. My son and I were walking this morning and somebody ran past me on the left-hand side and he barked into my ear is what it felt like to me. Now my son is much taller. He's a football player. He's like huge. And so the person ran past me and startled me. And I, without thinking, shoved my son off the path. He's like,
Oh my God, that's so funny. That was your mommy radar.
my mommy radar. It was an
Well,
automatic response. I didn't choose it. It just happened. So back to your question, Deanna, about freeze. So
mhm,
with the freeze response, Stephen Porges found that there's this third response that happens, which is that my nervous system is going to shut down my activity. Either I'm going to stand very still, but that's not really what it looks like in humans. It's more, I'm going to be like a head on a shelf. I'm going to be like
mhm,
a talking head. I'm not going to be having much emotion. I'm going to see pretty disengaged. I'm just kind of want,
mhm.
want, want, want. That's one way freeze shows up.
Mhm. So, here's the thing that I want people to realize though, because a lot of people who watch the show are business owners. And so what I find is we're talking about freeze when something big is happening. But here's the thing. I know that if I'm feeling verbally attacked or I'm actually just really confrontation averse too. So if I can tell like
Ooh,
my idea is different than someone else's idea in a meeting, that freeze response will actually come over
Absolutely.
under what seems to be really, it's not a crisis situation, but
Yeah.
I feel it coming on for sure.
100%,
So
Dana. That's such a great example.
Well, I was just gonna say, and I'll either freeze or Nancy, hi Nancy, shares that she sees. I've not heard of fib. So fight, flight, freeze, fib, or fawn. Fawn is, of course, the one where I guess I'm being attacked, and I'll be like, "Oh, you look so pretty today." Um,
Exactly. Exactly. Right, and
uh,
fib, I mean, that's great, Nancy. I actually haven't heard that either, but it intuitively makes sense. I will lie
mhm.
to get myself out of something. Not me. We don't do
Okay.
that. One will lie.
Mhm.
Don't worry, folks. A lying therapist is a bad one,
Oh.
um, uh, but yes, people will
Mhm.
those are I mean, that these are avoidant responses, right? So I haven't heard of fib, but yes, people lie, and
Oh,
that's
Brianna
actually
fawns.
considered right, right, yeah,
Oh.
right, people fawn, and
Mhm.
fawning is appeasing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say something
Mhm.
to make you happy, and then
Mhm.
you're gonna leave me alone.
Yeah.
These are all survival responses.
I will fawn more often when when I sense that there's a power differential. So it's kind
Mhm.
of like I freeze, and then maybe the way to get out of it is to fawn if I think it's someone who is, which
Yes.
for another show we'll talk about why I would automatically put myself into some sort of cased structure around other people, different topic.
Yes.
But that's when I
Yes.
do tend to fawn, where I'm going to
Yes.
now compliment the person because I feel like I've said something that is contradictory to their opinion.
100%, and that's when people tend to do it. In day-to-day
Mhm,
situations, all of this can come up in the workplace, and it doesn't really look like anything big is happening. It
mhm.
might be that your boss has a different opinion than you do. It might be that you have a coworker who's in a really bad mood. It might be that there's a customer who's very upset, and or just disappointed. And these are your natural responses, most of which we learned as kids, but that's another time.
Mhm, sure. So with these things, so we've got these nervous system responses. These are automatic. There is a connection though between what happens when your nervous system is activated and then how that connects with, let's say, feeling anxious or I guess even leading into depression. Could
Mhm,
you talk about how that happens? How does
mhm.
what's that sort of map from one from A to B?
Sure. So the research about some of these states is that anxiety can be a flight or even a fight response. That's anxiety, right? Anxiety is avoidance. It's I need to get away from something. So that will show up. It can show up as fight, flight, or freeze. Absolutely. So depression, there's newer research and writing about depression being, in part, an outcome of a freeze response because you're disconnected or your nervous system is shut down.
Hmm.
You're not really producing all the neurohormones, the neurochemicals, the messenger chemicals in your brain that you need to. Now, there's lots of things that can go into depression, but one of them might be a frozen response that's stuck.
Really? So if you get stuck in freeze,
Yep.
that can actually ultimately either manifest as depression or have the similar symptoms, is that the idea?
Both. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some folks, if we have lived in a state of heightened stress, hypervigilance,
Mhm.
chronic stress, you can wear out those neurohormones, those neurochemical producers in your body, and you can then go into a depressed state. So there's lots of things that can happen in your nervous system. You're a
Huh.
fitness instructor, Deanna, and so people think about they have to go to the gym. We
Mhm.
need to take our nervous systems to the gym
Mhm.
regularly too, so that we're more in control of these responses.
So what you're saying there is you can learn how to reset your nervous system and that it gets better with practice, like it's a muscle that you can work.
It's like a muscle that
Okay.
you can work.
So I have to this is like subliminal. So again, Margo mentioned she and I have worked together and I happen to know that drinking ice water is a response to a frozen vagus nerve. So like subconsciously just talking about this is I
You
can you
got
see my
parched.
body's getting yeah. No, I got like all my talking about anxiety makes me
See,
anxious.
like
Yeah.
this,
So
yeah,
I'm going to take a sip of my ice water because I
please do.
know how does that work? So I know that you talked about the vagus nerve and then how that impacts your whole body. Now watch my body language. I'm like this,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
right.
drink water.
Let's see what happens. We'll do a little in vivo experiment.
So, Margo, what's going on?
Yeah, right. Fabulous. Cheers. Yeah.
So too funny. So how does that tell our viewers what just happened to my body when I just did that?
Well, I mean, I don't know how much that ice water did, but one would think so some of the prescriptions for working your vagus nerve are,
Mhm,
we'll do a little practice at the end, but things that
mhm,
are called grounding, which is feeling your feet, feeling the chair that you're on, being in the moment. That's one thing. Ice or cold. I mean, this sounds horrendous to me, but like if people are starting to feel really anxious, plunging their hands into ice water, opening the freezer, sticking your face in and staying there, breathing in the cold air. This winter, there were a couple times I found myself, I was having a day and I just went outside
mhm,
and it was freezing cold because it is
mhm.
Chicago.
Sure.
And I just walked around a little bit and I felt much better. So I don't really know, Deanna, why this works. Like it makes it completely non-intuitive sense to me. But cold and exposure to cold or taking the coldest shower you can. If you're prone to anxiety,
Mm,
panic attacks, you have a big meeting, you're super anxious, you have a super big presentation, start your shower really cold. That will help reset or activate what's called your
mm,
parasympathetic nervous system. It sounds to me like it would make me nuts. I hate the cold, but
mhm,
it actually will
right.
help my nervous system. So that would be, it does
Mm,
something as now. Part of it is, I think, with the ice water, you're innervated. The vagus nerve is coming
mhm.
down through here, and my guess is that it's something that is activating because there's very little room between your in your chest and your vagus nerve. That would be my guess, but
Mhm. I just so you know, speaking of teaching aerobics, I like to I sing, especially when I teach aqua boot camp, like singing is part of class. And now I quote you in class and I tell people that singing is actually part of us like relaxing and I
yep.
sing terribly, but I always tell people, just for you, I'm going to sing louder though,
Right,
because
exactly, because Margo said I should. And so right, so yodeling, believe it or
Mhm.
not, so singing loudly and yodeling can be huge, right? Splash some cold water, right? I mean, that's what my mom used to say.
Your
Go
mom
splash some
knew.
right, and it was not warm water, but cold water, and actually the colder the better, so thank you for that, that's great. But yes, so making sure that what you're doing is cold enough is important. But yes, there's something about that that does impact the nervous system. So yodeling is another one, and again, if you think about what is gonna impact these nerves, for some people, there's tapping. Nick Order has, the
Mm.
tapping solution. He's written books.
Oh, you know what? 2 things really quick. I am gonna go back for 1 second because
Yeah.
the tapping I wanna mention, I know that's like part of like EMDR, isn't it? Like tapping or things on either side of
Well,
your
that
body?
it is, but I don't know that we're activating the parasympathetic
Okay.
nervous
And
system.
say parasympathetic nervous system is that's our nervous system that operates when we're just unconsciously standing there or
So there's you have the autonomic nervous system has 2 branches or now 3. The sympathetic, which is your fight or flight, right? Things are
okay.
all activated then, and your parasympathetic is broken up into 2, which is, we're talking about the freeze response. So you
Okay.
could be up here in a freeze response, meaning you're still producing tons of chemicals, and you like
Oh,
that little bunny
interesting.
is like, "Pachoo," they're
Mhm.
cortisol would be off the chart. Or there's this other way that it can show up, which is if something happens and a being, a critter, let's say, is can I tell a quick story? Do we have time for a quick
Yeah,
story?
please.
So, for example, and
Mhm.
everybody survives in my stories, same bunny munching on their grass. You know,
Mhm.
it's not me coming along with my dog who's well behaved and on a leash. It's a coyote. We've had just ridiculous coyotes in our area recently, whatever. So, a coyote, and it sees the coyote, and instead of the coyote moving along, it says, "There is dinner." The bunny's okay, everybody. In case you notice your own nervous system going, but the bunny.
I
So,
know. Well, and my family are all animal rights activists, so
yeah,
yes,
so,
but thank you
just
for
saying.
clarifying. No animals were
No
hurt in the telling
animals
of the
were injured in
story.
the story. None. So, but let's say here comes the darn coyote and it grabs the bunny starts to flee. It goes into fight or flight
Mhm.
because guess what? Bunnies not very good, at fighting. Got nothing. So they have to flee. They are built to flee. I mean, can you imagine? They're like poop, poop, little tail. Anyway, so the coyote is going after them. And let's say the coyote catches up to them and grabs their back leg. The bunny will immediately go into this other type of freeze response. So it's not the off the charts, I'm standing like this. It's that everything in my system starts to shut down so that the bunny doesn't experience what's coming next. So their heart rate will slow, their digestion will slow. This is part of the reason that lots of people have digestive issues, where our nervous systems are off, and our nervous systems are directly impacted. If you have a chronic fight response or freeze response, your digestion is going to be slowing because your digestion isn't necessary for saving your life in the moment. So just something to think about, folks. But anyway, so what'll happen is digestion will slow, the heart rate will slow, and the bunny might look a little catatonic or like it can't move. And what'll happen is, so in this story, here comes my dog, who now has seen all of this, is like, get out of here, leave that bunny alone. I want it, but I'm not going to let her have it. So the coyote will see my dog and me and will yell and bark. And
I just envisioned your dog with a cape on.
That's right. Super Ruby. That's right. Wonder Ruby. That would be her indeed. She's really something. Anyway, so off would go the coyote, and the bunny would lie there for a moment, lay there for a moment. Sorry, would lay there for a moment.
I need my mom. She's a big lie and lay person. You lay a book. Well, no, the bunny's probably lying. Sorry, just as a sidebar.
Okay,
right.
So sorry, we're having folks grammar moment. Grammar trauma clearly from Chicago.
We're like, it's going to be 12:30, and we'll be like,
I know,
wait,
like,
where's the story go? What were we talking about?
Exactly. And the bunny is still out there running. So anyway, so the bunny is going to be on the ground, whatever it's doing, laying or lying or both. And then it will start to twitch a little bit, and boom, it is going to have a shot of cortisol and adrenaline, and it'll take off again. That is another type of freeze response. That's more what it is like. So in humans, again, it's this shutdown. So we have the autonomic nervous system is fight, flight. Freeze is either up here, or it's this sort of, looking catatonic, like they can't move.
But I think ultimately what matters is a couple of things that are really interesting. One is just that the science of how our bodies work has advanced so much that we know this. And for people watching, it almost doesn't matter. You don't need, like, this is not going to be on the test if it's sympathetic or parasympathetic.
Yeah, right.
What's important to know is what your response is. And Margo, where that's helped. So Margo also she's so brave. She is writing a book on managing your own nervous system so you can actually parent teenagers. Those teenagers that we love, who can activate your nervous system.
I have two.
Yes, you have two. I have actually minus 21 now. So we're kind of getting on that other side. But where I started to notice the freeze, once I knew what a freeze reaction is, I would be in conversation with my child. And again, we love our children. Teenagers can challenge you. It's developmentally normative for a teenager to challenge you. And what I would find is my son all of a sudden would be like, you're not listening to me. I hate when you glaze over. You're not here. And I'd be like, but I'm right in front of you. But like, I'm here. I'm engaged. What I realized is when he would be sort of raising his voice verbally, which is normal for a teenager, he's making a point, I would go into freeze. And what would happen is that meant I'm just there like this, because I'm like, oh God, I don't want to get in a fight. I don't want to get in a fight.
Right.
And then he was responding to my freeze going like, you're not even here.
Yep.
So I guess the point is, it's not on the test of which nervous system it is,
right,
but recognizing that, now I'm able to actually say, I don't have a response to that right now, but I am here. I'm hearing what you're saying, so that I can trick myself to get around my nervous system.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that's fabulous. Right. So a fighter in that situation would scream back at your son.
And is that a good thing to do if you want to get along with your teenager, Margo?
Not necessarily. I think there's moments where being really clear and firm and strong can be fine.
Sure.
But, because sometimes we need to do that. But overall, not really. I mean, with anybody, because then their nervous system goes into fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah. And a teenager is more likely to go into fight, You know, you could just yell right back, and then your nervous systems are, I'll one up you, I'll see you and raise you, I'll see you and raise you. So, but to your point, yeah, knowing your own nervous system, what is your most likely reaction? And it might be any of those based on the situation. But that's a perfect example of what it's like to be in a freeze state. You're listening, you are hearing him, but you're not really responding, or you're all of a sudden unable to hear what's being said. Like the other person's talking and you're not even dialed in. You can't digest what's happening. That would be another example.
Do you have advice? I realize I keep talking about freeze because I'm there, but I'm just thinking now someone who is triggered and jumps, or someone who wants to just be completely avoidant. Do you have any advice for those people that where that tends to be their reaction to moments of stress?
Absolutely. So depending on the response, it doesn't even necessarily matter. Know your response. Are you one? I'm French. I came from a family that was very loud. My original tendency was to get kind of fiery. Well, that doesn't really work in the world. So I had to work on having ways to catch that in myself. I needed to notice that that was my response. I needed to stop and, people say, walk out of the room or count to 10. Well, there's actually some wisdom in that, because those responses of walking out of the room or saying, I need to take a break, or counting to 10 engages your prefrontal cortex and gets your system back off of that really heightened state. So that would be one thing. If you're someone who tends to flee, right, you get into a flight state, you may not be running out the door, but you're going to be avoidant, and you're going to change the subject, and you're going to do all kinds of other things to get around it. Know that response. And if that's your response, then you need to do something, whether, again, it's take a nice, long, deep, slow breath, feel your feet, look around you, name the colors of the room, get your prefrontal cortex back online, the thinking part of the brain, because it's off.
Let's do one of those. So you had said, so for any of these responses, it sounds like that you don't need to go to the spa and get a massage, although that's absolutely fabulous.
Please do if you can.
Right. But this is 1-minute things that you can do at your desk that it sounds like they'll reset your nervous system regardless of what your response is.
Yes, right. You may not be able to sing loudly or yodel, unfortunately, unless you work at Google or something.
Go for a drive. Oh man, I'm in the car next to you singing at the top of my lungs.
I love it. That's fabulous. Good for you, right? And I bet you feel better.
I do.
Right?
I do.
So, but things you can do. I just ticked off 3 of them. Do you want to practice one, Deanna? Is that?
I would love to practice one. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do one.
So here, we've heard people say, "Well, take a breath, calm down." Here's the thing about breathing. Breathing is the cheapest, most accessible, most successful, oftentimes, way to get your nervous system out of fight, flight, freeze, or appease, or fib, perhaps. Now, it depends on the situation you're in. I'm not talking about you're being chased by a dog, or somebody's, you're getting ready to be fired. I'm not talking about that. This is like somebody is talking, your son is talking, and you're like, I really want to be present for this conversation. So what you can do, so get yourself comfortable. This is another one which we can do another time, which is just noticing being comfortable. But because we're always overriding, especially at our age, we're the same age. But so we're just going to do a quick breathing exercise. So what the science of breathing says is that the best way to activate the part of your brain, your parasympathetic nervous system, is to do a count of 5 in. So we'll do that. And then 5 out. And as you're breathing out, really contract your stomach muscles. Breathe out all the way. Now, I have, I think, large lungs, and I've really toned these muscles so I can contract and do like a count of 15, sometimes 20. That's okay too. So everybody's body's different. For me, a count of 5 feels kind of shallow. Test this for yourself, but try to breathe in for a count of about 5. And try to get that breath below your diaphragm, which is right about here. And then breathe out. You want to get the breath into the belly and then all the way back out. We are not trying to relax, folks. That's different. We are simply—
that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Because people would say, well, that didn't work. Well, it didn't work how?
Sure.
You might feel more alert. You might feel more calm, but you may not feel relaxed.
Mhm.
That's fine. We are not trying to be relaxed. Okay, so
Mhm.
Brianna is saying just notice being comfortable.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. It's great. If you can just sit for 2 minutes and notice all the places that you're comfortable, your nervous system will love that. But also
Mhm.
singing, yodeling,
Mhm.
cold, counting, walking and counting your
Mhm.
steps, looking around the room and
Mhm.
naming objects, all of those things are good.
Well, and what it sounds like is sort of a short, simplistic summary, but that chronic activation of your nervous system can actually cause chronic anxiety and lead to depression. And so these little things to reset actually make a huge
Yes.
difference.
And
So,
one last quick thought. Sorry,
yeah,
one last
please.
quick thought. There is some specificity. If you are in freeze, you need motion. If
Oh,
you are
okay.
in motion, you need something calm. So
Okay.
you might pick that based on if I'm, in a really, then
Ah,
I need
gotcha.
yoga.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that
That
might
makes a
help
lot
you
of
choose.
sense. All
And
right. So now, speaking of everything we've talked about, why did I pick? So back to our interpretive aerobics.
indeed,
It was ear to shoulder look, and then
yeah,
that's a trapezius stretch. Tell me
uh-huh.
why I picked that exercise for our show.
Well, your vagus nerve is located in your neck. And so if you're able to stretch out anything in the arena of your
Mhm.
neck, you are activating your vagus nerve. That would be my guess. I don't
Yes.
know why you would do that, but that would be my guess.
I kept once I picked it, I just kept layering meaning onto it. I just want you to know how deep like these moves can be. So yes,
Right?
one, that's the
Yes.
vagus nerve. Second,
Mhm.
sometimes we can fixate on looking at things one way, whereas, let me look at it a
Ah,
different way.
oh,
Helps.
nice.
And then the
Yes.
third one, there is no way that anyone would guess this, and this is a different topic on childhood trauma. I had a gymnastics teacher when I was 10 who used to make us do 100 neck turns. It was 100, we'd
Oh,
have to lie on our back and do 100 neck turns to strengthen our neck. And it was because he was in I was 10, he was in Vietnam, and he said he got, like, attacked, and the only reason he survived is because he had strong neck muscles. Um,
okay.
so no way you would know that, but I just found that interesting in terms of all these years later, he remembered
Yes.
it. So,
Okay. I mean, that sounds horrible, but
and then the
no
final
kidding.
I know, the final oh, I digress. He actually had a plastic eye that he would then take out to, like, emphasize.
Just
This
make the
was like
point.
my parents
What
dropping
really
me off at
happened?
gymnastics.
You're like a 10-year-old going, "Oh my gosh."
But the final thing for that though too is that we sometimes one of the things of an activated nervous system is we sit like this, we scrunch our shoulders all day.
Mhm.
So it's a reminder that even that
Yep,
motion of kind of coming down is there. So
right, up and back. And one last comment,
yeah.
Deanna, is be careful if you are a trauma survivor, sometimes our bodies will resist. So if you feel
Mm.
more panicky when you do it, don't do that one again. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, just don't do it again.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Or actually call find Margo on social media or on
Please
her
do.
website. Or actually, so if anyone's around tomorrow morning at 9:30. So Margo is also the host of the business mentor, it's the business mentor podcast where she counsels other mental health practice owners on how to grow their practice. But she also does the Juniper Center Thrive Live, which is about so it's the Mental Health Business Mentor podcast tomorrow for Thrive Live, which is all about how to normalize conversations about mental health. Poet John Rodell, who writes poetry about mental health. So look for that.
Amazing.
I'll put it in the show notes. He is amazing. And
He's
I'm
amazing.
guessing his reciting poetry is big too. So
Yes, and he's a great guy. So yes, if you can join us tomorrow, please do.
yeah. Thank you so much for being on the
Thank
show. I
you.
loved our conversation. Thank you, everyone who was watching and for your contributions. And we are next week live from Malta. I'm going to be at the CSADC, the Society of Intercultural Educators,
Nice.
Trainers, and Researchers in Malta. I just like to say that. And we're going to broadcast live. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'll see you next week.
Lovely. I'm gonna watch it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we will see you next week. Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.